Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and I have a hot button topic to talk about today. So we're going to just dive right in. We're going to talk about the quote-unquote gap, right? The gap between the end game, the late game, the mid game, the early game, the beginning. And is it shrinking? Because I think a lot of people they're constantly saying, oh, all this content is all for the end game. It's supposed to make them so much better, and it's just meant to crap on all the little people. And I think that could not be further from the truth. I'm going to give you guys my opinion on this, show you why I think that gap is like really shrinking right now, and show you maybe some concrete proof of why it needs to shrink. So let's dive right into our video. I am going to be referencing my Phases of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video a lot during this, so if you haven't seen that, go check it out. I will link it in the video description down below. Basically just highlights how I view each of the different phases of this game, and I identified 5 of them. So, the time when this gap is shrinking, it's always shrinking in my mind. Even if you start an account today, you're going to be shrinking that gap because of all the things that happen. But when you'll really start to make a noticeable impact, in my opinion, is when you get to the mid-game at 4 million. When you hit Hard Mode Conquest and Proving Grounds, is when you'll really be able to watch that gap shrink significantly because of the access you'll have to better resources and better characters through those events. So that is just one of the things that I think they've done with Proving Grounds, where with these conquest characters, I'm trying to see if I don't have them on here. These conquest characters, unaligned Force users might get me a couple of them, right? At least get me 2. With like Commander Ahsoka Tano, Ben Solo, Maul, right? So you're going to be able to earn shards for all 3 of them at the same time. You'll also be able to get characters like Darth Malgus there, the TIE Interceptor, Boba Fett signed a Django for all, you'll be able to earn shards for all of those characters as soon as you hit 4 million. So as long as you have a galactic legend that's capable of beating that event, or a team that's capable of beating those events, which there's plenty of guides out there on how to do it, you're going to be able to grow significantly faster than someone who had to wait years for Ben Solo to come into the game. You might have Commander Tano, but we had to wait years for Ben Solo. So you're going to have access to those things faster. Much faster than someone who is playing the game now. Like, we are just getting the Fury-class Interceptor right now. When that ship eventually hits Proving Grounds, people are going to have access to be able to farm the Leviathan that much faster, because that ship will be available to them much earlier in their galactic power journey than someone like me right now who's at 8.6 million. So that's one of the ways that I think this gap is really shrinking, is they're using that hard mode conquest, that 4 million threshold, to say, once you're over this point, we're more than willing to give you access to all of these really great characters, and then you can choose what order you want to level them up in. So that's one of the ways this gap is shrinking. The second way this gap is shrinking is actually something that we've speculated about for a long time, and it still has never come to fruition, and that is Relic 10. We don't have Relic 10 in the game yet. We have Relic 9, and when Relic 9 was released, I 100% will say that I thought Relic 9 was way too soon. And you look at my roster, and I have 2 of them. I have 2 Relic 9s. I have, so you could count each of them as 2 Relic 8s. So if we count all the Relic 8 characters I have, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Does that sound right? Yes. 4 for Lord Vader, 3 for Profundity. I don't know. Whatever number. That's it. We counted, right? So that's the number of Relic 8s that I have. And then 2 Relic 9s. So as an 8.6, I could have more Relic 8s. I have enough that I could at least do, I think. Could I do 2 Relic 8s? Yeah. So I have enough materials that I could put some additional Relic 8 characters on. But I'm not ready to do that because I'm trying to save for other things. But in my mind, Relic 8 is still a very expensive thing. And then Relic 9 to me just blows my mind of how expensive that is. And I think they haven't released Relic 10 because they understand that if they release Relic 10, that gap between those late endgame players is going to exponentially increase comparative to those who still are struggling to get Relic 8 materials. So I think what they're trying to do before getting to Relic 10 is making Relic 8 materials more accessible. And this is why I think that the Crate Dragon raid is doing what it is, why they needed to change the rewards to give you things like impulse detectors, error magnifiers early in your Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes journey than you would have been able to get them before, is because they're looking at this and saying, we need to make sure that they have access to these things, because we want to be able to release Relic 10, but we don't even see enough Relic 9s in the game that we feel that releasing it would just, piss more people off than it would, help. So that's another reason that this gap has been shrinking, is that Relic 9 has been out for so long and they haven't gone above it, that it's allowing you to catch up on some of those things. Now, the argument is, oh, these guys are equipping Relic 8s, Relic 9s, and I can't do it. I understand that. But imagine they start releasing Relic 10 requirements. Now you're that much farther behind all those other people. So I think they're kind of letting it catch up a bit before they do the next thing. And maybe they don't go higher. We don't know. So the last thing is the way that they've done with gear. I mean, they have made shard farming easier. They've made gear farming easier. Even the new crate raid. The change to the way you can buy the character shards for these raids between Darth Treya, Han Solo, and General Kenobi, where you can choose to buy which one of these you want, which is unbelievable to me that they let you do that. But I think the way you're going to have to see these changes is similar to a race. So I ran cross country and track all through college. And one of the things that I, would use to say, hey, this is the way that this, works, is that, if you're an endgame player, we're going to start with endgame here. Let's say they have a 50-meter lead over the field, right? That they're leading by 50 meters over the beginning, right? Over your beginning. So your endgame is a 50-meter advantage. With what Capital Games has done, they're saying, hey, you know what? For the beginning players, we're going to let them close that gap by 10 meters. So now to that endgame player, they're only 40 meters behind them. We've done all these things to ensure that they can catch up. So now that gap is 40 meters. Now you think, oh my gosh, why is it, it should be 0. No, you should not be able to go from the beginning game to the very end of the game right away. But that gap is smaller, right? They lessen that gap. Now that 10-meter gap is, that distance that you closed. You didn't just close that on the end game, but you closed that on the late game player who's maybe only 40 meters ahead of you, but you closed it by 10 meters. Or that mid game player who's 30 meters ahead and you closed it by 10. And each time you're thinking, oh, I'm getting closer and closer and closer, but you haven't actually progressed anymore in any of those situations, right? That you didn't grow, maybe 1 million GP here, 1.1 here, you grew the same amount, just the account you're comparing yourself to isn't as far ahead in the game as you are. So by the end here with this early game, you close that gap by 10 meters and maybe they only had a 20-meter advantage. You close the gap by, you're going to think you're knocking on that door, but you haven't changed how much you actually progressed. So I think that's a really important analogy. Hopefully it helps you guys. It helps me kind of understand the way these gaps work, that they're going to let you close it. They're going to make it less for you to have to get to that end part. But understand that depending on which character or which player you're looking at to compare yourself to, you're going to seem closer or farther away from your goal. The last thing we need to cover, obviously we need to pay homage to our king, Wampa. If you guys want to see Wampa hit Relic 8 live on stream, all you need to do, get this channel to 5,000 subscribers. If we hit 5,000, Wampa hits Relic 8, special live stream. We'll do all sorts of fun stuff there. We are fast approaching that number. Remember, guys, Wampa may not always be in your team, but he's always in your heart because he is king. So the last topic that I want to bring up has to do with Galactic Legends, right? And the release of characters. So with Galactic Legends, they've gone to a much more slow release. They used to release characters like Kylo and Rey came out as a pair. Jedi Master Luke and Sith Eternal came out as a pair, right? They released at the same time. Then they switched to, we're going to release Jedi Master Kenobi. And then a few months later, we got Lord Vader. And then about maybe, I don't know, was it a year, a little bit longer after we got Lord Vader, we got Jabba the Hutt. So they're slowing down the progression and release of Galactic Legends. And I think that is so important for lessening this gap between the, haves and have-nots, is if they just kept churning these characters out, that gap would grow and grow and grow and grow, because those people who are willing to spend, or at the end game who have the flexibility to be farming stuff like this, they would just benefit. So by making sure that they're not releasing crazy amounts of Galactic Legends at all times, they're allowing you to catch up. I mean, great example, when I first got my first Galactic Legend was Sith Eternal. So everybody, all the top guys in my arena shard had the 4 Galactic Legends that were available at the time, right? The top guys. They had Luke, Kylo, Sith Eternal, and Rey. Now, obviously, those guys have all 7 Galactic Legends. So I'm only 1 Galactic Legend behind now, where I was, at one point, I was 4. So the argument I'm making there, sure, they could have Relic 8s, Relic 9s. I understand all that stuff. But in terms of what I have in my roster and the ability to compete, I'm getting closer and closer all the time, because they're not releasing enough of these things to keep them from, being able to stay ahead of me in terms of what I'm able to, unlock. Especially with the 2x drops on older characters, you should be flying through at that point. Because you think, if I'm farming a single drop character and you're farming a double drop character, you're getting 2 times as many shards as I am, making 2 times as much progress. So hopefully this video helps you. Hopefully it paints the picture that this gap is shrinking. You just need to look at it the right way, and you need to understand all of the ways that that gap shrinks, that as you get further and further, you will see that gap narrow and narrow and narrow, and it'll probably always be there. There'll be a point where you're like, I'm not really growing on these guys anymore. But when you hit that point, that's normally when people are looking at you to be the one that they're trying to judge how they're growing. So that's the end of the video, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. As always, smash that subscribe button, leave likes, leave comments. I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.